Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to be answering the question for you guys of how much RAM you should buy for gaming in 2020. And to do that, what I'm going to do is test 4 different configurations of RAM that are possible to have in 2020 and see how each one of those performs in 4 different popular games in 2020. Okay, I'll stop saying in 2020. And to do that, I actually bought this 2 times 4 GB kit of DDR4. It's Viper Patriot to be exact. And I'm going to be using this to test the 4 different configurations. And those 4 different configurations are what I have in my system right now. First, 16 gigabytes in dual channel, 8 gigabytes in dual channel, 8 gigabytes in single channel, and 4 gigabytes in single channel. So I'm going to test all those different configurations in 4 different games, just see how much performance you get in each one and how much RAM you should buy as a reason of how much performance you get. Let's get right into it. These are the system specs of the machine I'm going to be using to test all these different RAM configurations with. The only thing I'll be changing is the amount of RAM installed and the channel.
As you can see, this is a pretty well-spec'd system, and that is by intention. That way, when I'm testing the different RAM configurations, if there's a bottleneck, it'll be the RAM, not the CPU or the GPU, even though neither the CPU or the GPU are overclocked at this time.
You might be wondering what speed I'm going to be running all of the different configurations of RAM in. And what I'm going to be doing actually, just to achieve sort of like baseline numbers, is just running everything at the default speed for DDR4 of 2133 megahertz. That way we can make sure that everything is always clocked at the same speed the whole time, since these RAM kits have different speed capabilities. So I'm just going to be running this kit as well as the one that I already have installed in my system at 2133 megahertz the whole time, just to simplify things. So I've been benchmarking and swapping out RAM sticks and all that for the last few hours, and without further ado, here are the results.
The first game I tested was Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I did so at 1080p with all settings maxed. It was strange here because it seems that the difference in FPS only existed when going from single channel to dual channel, not when changing the amount of RAM installed. While that is true, it is also true that with only 4 gigabytes, there were some performance issues. The menus were extremely stuttery, and I kept on thinking the game was going to crash because it would just hang for like 2 whole seconds, sometimes in one stutter. That being said, once I got into the game, I was kind of amazed by the fact that it actually kind of ran acceptably well with only 4 gigabytes in single channel installed, albeit with less FPS than in the dual channel configurations, but not much less. The fact that Assassin's Creed Valhalla ran pretty much without a hitch with only 4 gigabytes of RAM installed in single channel is especially surprising when you consider that Ubisoft themselves recommend a bare minimum of 8 gigabytes of RAM in dual channel for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. That goes to show how little minimum requirements mean sometimes, guys. But that being said, there was no difference in FPS at all from dual channel 8 gigabytes to 16 or from 4 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes in single channel, which was quite surprising. Next up, I tested an older game, that is Grand Theft Auto 5 at 1080p with very high settings. This game sort of followed the trend of Assassin's Creed Valhalla for the most part, with the single channel and dual channel varying in FPS, but not between 8 gigabytes and 16 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes and 8 gigabytes in single channel and dual channel. In fact, with 8 gigabytes in dual channel, my system got more FPS than with 16 gigabytes in dual channel, but this can easily be chalked up to the margin of error. That being said, what was different about this game than Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and quite surprisingly in fact, was that it did not run that well. It was very stuttery with 4 gigabytes of RAM even in-game, unlike Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This was very surprising because I expected GTA 5, which came out 7 years ago, to perform much better with 4 gigabytes of RAM than Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which literally came out so recently. The next game I tested was CSGO at 1080p with very low settings. Now, I would chalk up these differences to just the margin of error, were it not that they were literally in order as you might expect, with 4 gigabytes in single channel giving the least FPS and 16 gigs in dual channel giving the most. So these differences were likely not margin of error, but the difference is so small that it doesn't really matter, although if you really are competitive in CSGO, it seems evident that 16 gigs in dual channel is your best bet. Lastly, I tested a Metro Exodus at 1080p using ultra settings. As you can see here, 4 gigabytes of RAM in single channel actually provided more FPS than 8 gigabytes in single channel, 8 gigabytes in dual, more than 16 in dual, which seems impossible, and these results in this case have to be due to margin of error, because the CAS latency of the 8 gigabyte modules that I used is actually better, but for some reason it performed worse, and all RAM tested was always running at the same speed of 2133 megahertz. So margin of error is the only explanation. So we can reliably say that 4 gigabytes in single channel and 8 gigs in single, and 8 in dual and 16 in dual provided equal performances, with the dual channel always providing significantly more performance, about 10 or so more FPS. This game, like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, was not stuttery very much, even with 4 gigabytes of RAM. When in game, that is, once everything had loaded in.
So now it's time to answer the question that you're all here for. How much RAM should you buy for gaming in 2020? And the answer to that question is a bit complicated, but of course it depends what sort of gaming you are planning on doing. For most types of gaming, like I would recommend 16 gigabytes. Honestly, if you're playing any AAA games at all, there's no reason not to have 16, especially given the cheap price of RAM today. And when I say 16, I mean, of course, it should be noted 16 in dual channel, not single channel. Because as you saw for yourselves, single channel provides much worse performance, and it's even better to have 8 in dual likely than 16 in single. The only thing is, if you're on a very tight budget, it might not be a bad idea to get only 8 gigabytes. But if you do that, make sure you also do dual channel for 2 times 4 gigabytes and not just one 8 gigabyte module. Definitely no single channel. But yeah, either 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes. 16 unless you're really in a pinch. Like we saw, 8 is not really going to provide much worse performance than 16, but just because RAM is really very cheap nowadays, there's no reason not to have 16 to future-proof. I know there's people out there who say that you should have 32 gigs to future-proof, but honestly, I just can't disagree more with those people, because as you can see, 8 gigabytes is still a lot of times enough to get by, provided it's in dual channel, and 16 is already kind of future-proofing, unless you're playing something like Red Dead Redemption 2, where you actually probably will need more than 8. But anyways, you're not at the point where you need 32 for like any game, and probably by the time that that becomes standard, DDR5 is already going to become standard, so you're going to have to buy new RAM anyways. So for that reason, I just cannot recommend 32. Get 16, unless if you really can't afford it, like you're on a very strict budget, then get 8. And that's about all. But not too long ago, guys, I did a video in which I answered the question for you, how fast RAM should you be getting for gaming, by comparing different RAM speeds in games with benchmarks. If you want to see that video, click right here. Thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like down below, subscribe to my channel. I post a new video every single Sunday, and I'll see you guys in the next one.